This week we read about learning and transfer, and one of the things that stood out to me about transfer is the building block transfer, and that would be where it comes to math, you first learn to count, you learn your numbers. Then once you have mastered that, you progress to adding and subtracting. And then once you've mastered that, you move on to multiplying and dividing. And you keep progressing as you master each subject. Also, when you look at English, you start off with mastering your alphabet. Once you have mastered alphabet, you put the two letters together and you create words. Once you create words, you go on to the next level, which is creating sentences, and that progresses. Eventually, you are typing or writing paragraphs and things like that. Another form of transfer is when someone can take, basically what transferring, we learned that transferring is taking something from one context and putting it into another. And with that, you will see that some subjects kind of intermingle. A good example of that is going to be math and science. I have heard most of my life that usually when someone is good in math, they're going to be good in science. And I would say that that's pretty accurate because you deal with an awful lot of numbers throughout science and chemistry because you're measuring things. You have to know how much of one item to put into something to create another item. And so that was a big one. As far as another form of transfer goes, you take what you have learned in school and you put it into what you are doing in the real world. This, again, is very, math is a big one that is transferred over into what you do in the real world. You can't get away from math. You have it in places like Walmart, where even when you're going shopping, you have to determine how much you've got to spend and how much you're going to spend without, having to use credit card, of course. You have to know how much of something that you're going to need, because if you don't, you're going to be going back to Walmart many times, or the grocery store many, many times. English is also done this way because, and a lot of people don't think about it like this, but in order to communicate well, you have to know how to speak, and English is very important. You don't want to come off not knowing what you want to say every time you talk to a certain person and look like a total idiot, so to speak. Sorry, but it's honest to God truth. Some of the things that were brought up is memorization, and I don't really like to think about the memorization too much because it's very hard on some people. It's not good to memorize something just for the sake of memorizing it for a test. You can memorize it and then the next day you don't remember anything about it. You see that in things like Spanish, and that was brought out in one of the videos that we watched, the 5-Minute University. The gentleman made very valid points in that a lot of things that you do learn in college, you don't really remember out in the real world. However, if you are retaining some of that information and taking it out in the real world, and you start using it more, it comes back to you a little bit easier. So in that aspect, I can see that memorization is good. You also have an understanding of how important that stuff was that you learned. And that was something else that was brought up. Um, you tend to have motivation in learning if you know where you're going to use it when you get out of school.